Hey everyone, welcome back to Rally Caps. It's a podcast for artists, entrepreneurs, and everybody in between. My name is Eric.
And I'm Cyrus.
And today's episode doesn't have Steven.
Sad.
It's just Cyrus and I. You've seen Cyrus on it, 100th episode. You were on for a bit.
Yeah. I was on another episode talking about something. I don't remember.
Yeah, you bop in every once in a while.
Yeah.
Who are you, Cyrus?
I'm just a person.
Just a dude.
I'm just a dude.
Just a dude
I'm
that
a
hangs
chill
around
guy.
the studio.
I'm just a chill
like
guy.
that meme. We got to play the background music for today we are talking about what it looks like to be a young creative in today's creative world. What it looks like to have your foot in the world of entrepreneurship and creative entrepreneurship at that, because Cyrus is a shining example of what that is. We are over a decade removed from each other in age. And long story short, I'll just give you the story of how I met Cyrus. And I don't know if we've discussed this at all on the pod before. We might have briefly said it, but the story is really fun. We were at Danny Gewurtz's Chicago screening of I Think I'm Sick, his feature film. And, we were like sort of featured guests with Danny. So we had a whole day where we podcast with him. We hung out with him and the crew all day. And before the show, Cyrus approaches me, and he was the second person I'd ever in person heard that had watched both my creative channel and my running channel. And so he said that. He's like, I like what you make in both places. Here's my elevator pitch. Because a lot of people at that point would come up to me and be like, do you want to go hit sunrise at North Avenue tomorrow and shoot the sunrise? And I'd be like, nah, I have a family. No, I'm sorry. But he knew the weight of my heart. He was like, here's my pitch. Can we go on a run together tomorrow? And I was like, yeah, we can. Because I don't know, he was just really bold in his approach to do that. And not many people had asked to run with me at that point. That was kind of like a new and exciting thing for me, because I had just started growing the running side. So we ended up running in the afternoon the next day. I worked from home, and then I invited you over to my house.
Yeah. Well, actually, you guys recorded an episode with Carlo.
Right, that morning.
So I was staying
Another Rally Caps point.
Right. I was staying in Lincoln Park. And so I just Ubered over here first thing in the morning, because you guys recorded at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
And then went
And
with
you just sat right over there.
Yeah, I just watched, and then
You're like, what is going on?
It
Because
was
you followed
insane.
Carlo too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I just sat in the back of your car while you drove Carlo to the airport.
Yeah.
I just listened to the entire conversation, and Carlo was like, oh, I forgot there's a guy back there.
It's like a free mentor session,
Yeah.
right?
I was just chilling and listening to everything. And then, we went to your house. We went for a run, and I got to meet your family and everything. It was crazy.
Yeah. So I remember distinctly hanging out in my kitchen, and I was just kind of sharing my business and philosophies and all that stuff. And we very quickly realized that we were really aligned on a lot of those things, that we cared a lot about the same things. It was very clear that you cared about fitness, and I obviously at that point was really caring about fitness and still do. And yeah, it was just very, very different than any other creative world interaction that I'd had with anyone. And it's, not to gloat or prop myself up or anything, but when you have a certain status on YouTube and you have a certain number of followers, you get a lot of DMs that are, can I assist you? Can I second shoot for you? Can I this, that, the other? And at this point, anything that exists outside of a creative way to ask something like that just kind of turns into static noise, because it's I obviously can't say yes to all of these requests. And really the only way to filter it, because it's not that I want to cut it out completely. How can I actually connect with people who I resonate with philosophically in the creative realm, who it feels wrong and weird to say this, but could benefit me from a business perspective. I have a hard time saying that, because that's just, it feels antithetical to my personality. But at the same time, if we're talking business, that's a reality of it. You know, my time is so limited and my time is so precious to me regarding all of my training and family, that it would have to be something that's beneficial. So I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but that's what then led to the following months and then where we're at now. But to kind of rewind it a bit back, Cyrus is a filmmaker, if you couldn't tell at this point, and he had closely been following Danny Gevirtz. I don't know if you probably like Danny's stuff more than my stuff, I assume.
I think I actually found out about you like later than most people, because I found out about you and Creative Club from your Rally Caps episode with Danny. Because I was following Danny, which I had heard of him through like Matty Hipoya.
Sure.
And then, yeah, watched Danny's stuff and then saw that episode and then watched like all of your backlog of stuff. And like, I was really interested in the fact that you talked a lot about like how to actually make money.
Yeah.
And we're like more open with that than most people. Because that's something that I like definitely care about and like was interested in. And so like, I think like Danny made more like short films and stuff, like maybe more like inspiring work, but your stuff was like, okay, this is how I can actually like make money doing this, and like showing that there's like a way to not just be like a struggling artist in that world. So,
yeah. And yeah, it was just crazy that the intersection of those worlds, both in how you found us online, also brought us together in the real world. And then you got to go to, because it wasn't any small feat that you landed in Chicago to go to that event. That was a very, very intentional decision on your part, because you lived in Florida at the time. So you took the risk on flying to Chicago for this. And obviously, when you asked me that question to connect in that way, that was your shot at like, I want to try to make this trip worth the investment for what it could mean for the future. Am I right in saying that?
yeah, I mean, I don't think that like I had any idea what it could have been. I think it was more so just like, I mean, I definitely thought about like, okay, I'm going to ask him to run rather than like shoot stuff, because I think that that's a better chance of like getting to him and being like unique. But I wasn't like, oh, let me like get a job. It was definitely more of like, let me just like see if I can actually like connect with this guy, because it would be cool to like find like a way into this world. Because when you're on the outside, it's really easy to feel like it's impossible to like reach that like circle of people that are like all up here. And then I think that trip like opened my eyes to how accessible it actually is. Even like now that I'm here, seeing how much you like communicate with people that might be like on the outside. Like I just never tried to do that because I assumed that I wouldn't get responses from people. But yeah, that trip was very eye-opening, and then it was really tough going back, and like how quickly I felt like, oh, I'm just back in the same old, like not getting anywhere.
So give some more context as to what your life looked like at that point. Give some context in what high school and college looked like, what your creative career sort of started as at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, I went to school. I mean, I got like my first camera in high school, just like took photos, and then I made like a few really bad YouTube videos my senior year, and they're all private now for a reason. But I went to college actually to run, and then was injured and wasn't really in love with school, so I dropped out after a semester, and so I started freelancing. I also like got part-time jobs to like supplement my income and everything, but I was just shooting like high school sports, not anything creative or fun or any of that. And then actually when I met you, that was like May of 2023, that was like I'd say a pretty big like shift in what I was doing, because I spent the first maybe 3 or 4 months of that year planning, and then I posted daily on Instagram for 6 weeks. And the trip to Chicago was like the end of that 6 weeks. and it was something that I'd seen on Instagram, like a challenge. And so I did it. I gained maybe like 200 followers from doing that, but it was like,
That's something.
yeah. And it definitely like got the reps in, and I just bought the FX3. So I was like learning how to like actually use a real camera. And then I had DM'd a guy named Trevor Foley asking if I could do his YouTube content. He was a professional triathlete from around where I was from. And so that DM that I sent him was probably, I think it was within the same month as the trip to Chicago.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought it was much sooner than that.
No.
Or farther back.
And so I remember talking to you about the whole idea of doing work for him because I had
And
just,
I was kind of like, what?
yeah.
Okay.
I was like, I was just getting in contact with him, and I'd seen him in a different professional triathletes YouTube videos that had a massive following, and saw the potential that he could have. And so
Value proposition.
yeah. And I just like used my unfair advantage of being like, yeah, I'm from the same hometown. Like we raced against each other. I know the space, whatever. And then did his YouTube content for the rest of 2023. And I'm assuming that you paid a little bit of attention to it. I think I sent you one of the videos that I'd made that I was like really proud of. And then I remember I'd actually just got back from a trip with him to a race. I was driving back to my girlfriend's condo, and I got a text from you that was like, hey dude, like Chicago Marathon, it's in like 3 weeks. Can I fly you out for the weekend? And I remember like reading that text, and I was like, oh my God. Like I couldn't believe it. Yeah. Like I like called my mom and everything. I was like freaking out.
Yeah.
And then I was like, duh, of course.
Yeah.
And you were like, yeah, I'll pay you like X amount. And it was much more than I'd ever been paid for anything. I was like, yes, please. Like I'll do this for free. I don't care. Yeah. And yeah, then I came out for Chicago Marathon of 2023. And obviously that was like, it worked out time-wise because you had just you had discontinued your, I guess, contract or whatever with your former employee just before that. So you needed someone to film that weekend, and I was kind of in that space. And I don't know if maybe you just like saw, I was like, yeah, this would be fun to bring him out or whatever.
Well, yeah, it goes back to me saying no to a lot of people regularly because not a lot of people are coming at it from a unique angle or a creative angle. And so you were front of my mind when I thought of someone to bring out, because there are a handful of people in Chicago I could have asked to do that, no doubt. But I knew, because of your background in the sport, your knowledge of understanding what a marathon is, the fact that you were already working with a triathlete and doing training and racing coverage, I thought, well, it would actually be way more beneficial to have you come out because you understand this whole world so much easier. And so we often talk about the idea of unfair advantages and how you can leverage those in work situations. And it was clear with Trevor that you did that, but it's kudos to you that you, no pun intended, with all of you Strava fans, kudos to you for doing that leap of reaching out to Trevor and using those unfair advantages of, hey, I connect with you because we're from the same area. I know the sport well. You basically gave him an offer he couldn't refuse, where really anybody clearly, and you felt this, that he wanted to make content, that he wanted to build a YouTube channel. You saw the potential in it because you'd been studying the space. You gave him an offer he couldn't refuse. You were willing to work for really cheap and, just ad revenue or, like going out to and doing grinding that way. And you built a portfolio of work where and it was really strategic on your part too. Like, hey, I'm going to wait until I have one that I'm really proud of. I'm going to send it to Eric because that's going to plant a seed, which it did. Because I watched it, I'm like, this is really well produced YouTube video. It's not often that you see it of this caliber. And I saw the potential in you at that point. And then the intersection of you and the age that you're in and the part of life that you're in, if someone was married or they had kids or those things, I wouldn't feel as comfortable being like, you want to fly all the way out to Chicago? Even though they might want to do that, you're in that hustle and grind phase of being really young, willing to work within the budget that I had. And I was willing to pay like pretty good money to be able to have something really quality because I knew the potential of what a race video was, and that race video now has like 100,000 views, and you know, grew the channel exponentially and all that stuff. Yeah, and so then I think at that point, that phase where I was back to working solo with no employee, I was feeling the weight of that and being like, well, this could potentially be a trial phase for him. And I don't think I floated that to you before you came. No. But I think I sort of alluded to it that marathon weekend, right?
Yeah, I think I remember we were like down in the freight area in your car, and I was like, if you ever want an intern or something, like I'd be down to do like a couple months, or
like that's the right time to do it then.
Yeah.
That's not the leading thing.
Right.
Right. Because you do that leading thing off of what? I'm going, sure. I actually can't waste my time figuring out if you are capable or not, because that means I'm basically mentoring you from nothing.
Yeah.
And I can't, like, my time is too precious to me in my work day. So taking a shot on someone just off of them asking for an internship, it usually isn't the right way to go. You lead with value first. You lead with your clever approach, your strategic approach, prove yourself a little bit, and then go, hey, like, I'm looking for more work then.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yes. I think I specifically remember we're coming back from the expo, driving back to my house, and it might have been then, where, I was like, well, I'm looking, I can handle working alone right now, but it would be a lot easier if I did have extra help. And basically I didn't want to offer it to you before I could see, what you were capable. Cause then I just tossed something at you. It was like the pre-race video, hype video. And then you stayed up late and crushed that edit. And then the next day I was like, whoa, okay. Mm-hmm. That video did really well. Got a ton of people hyped up for the race, and then crushed all the coverage, regarding the race and the race weekend. So I'm fuzzy on the timeline of when I asked you then. I think...
Yeah, it actually happened like removed from marathon weekend, like a few weeks, because marathon was like early October, and then it was the beginning of November. And I remember you texted me and you were like, hey, like we should talk about internship type thing. And then we got on the phone maybe like a day later. And
you're on the stationary bike.
Yeah, I was like biking at the time. I was trying to get fit. And I remember going into the phone call, I was like, okay, like this could be like a 2 or 3 month internship or something. And I remember getting on the phone, you're like, yeah, so I think that you should like move to Chicago and like work for me full time. I was like, whoa.
Wait.
I was not expecting that.
Yeah.
And then it was like at that point, based off of like in Florida, there's not much work. Like the work that I was doing was majority out of state for that triathlete. Like he was based in Tucson at the time. And how I saw it was like, not only is this like guaranteed work, but it's also like basically like working under your mentor at the same time. Like it's a lot of learning opportunity. It's a lot of like networking opportunity, like being inside that circle that I was talking about, and also like getting money at the same time. So it kind of felt like a no-brainer. And I had to like break my girlfriend's heart a little bit when I told her.
A lot of it.
Yeah, that was really hard. But I mean, we're doing great. It's not like we broke up.
Yeah. 2 years, just celebrated 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years. So we're doing good. But yeah, I mean, I remember like then we had a few more phone calls like discussing how that could all work and timeline. And then that was like November, December time, right when I was like actually in decent running shape. And then I moved here at the beginning of February.
And now you're a bodybuilder.
I guess so. I'm just fat right now.
Up to 205.
Yeah, 205.6 this morning.
Yeah, but in high school you were 140.
135.
135.
At
Crazy.
the same height.
Same height. Yeah, that's insane. I think that was the other component of this, is that outside of just your portfolio and what I saw in your creative and artistic work, is that you were so disciplined in stuff outside of that landscape entirely. And so when we have these like intersecting points of interest and things that we do, you know, it comes to fitness, it comes to creativity. You get it, you understand it. And so I saw an insane amount of value in that because you would understand the complexity of the work and how crazy it can be at times when it's we're in a marathon training block and we need to be posting weekly videos, or race weekend with how psychotic it is, and like dedicate every hour to work on those trips and just be ready and flexible. I saw all that potential in you. I guess a big question, this is also fun to sit down and do this because it's like our days are revolving around working all the time in here. Mm-hmm. So it's good to just like sit down, and that's my fault for not doing the quarterly assessments I said I would do. But like, how do you feel that played out? Do you feel like it's more intense, it's less intense, it's what you expected? As far as and if it's not abundantly clear, Cyrus is my full-time employee. We didn't say that in the beginning. Yeah. What does it feel like expectation wise versus, and you're allowed to be an open book here. There's no censorship.
Yeah. I mean, I think that in terms of workload, like it is a full-time job, but like when you're talking about those like crazy like weekends or whatever, it's not anything new to what I was doing with the triathlete.
Right.
Like I remember I was spending weeks, like the week before a race, I was doing daily vlogs leading into a race and then trying to turn around a race video as quickly as you can. And that was like 7-8 days straight of like shooting all day, editing through the night, posting the next morning. Crazy. And so like, I mean, I think that that's like what I pride myself on, is that like I'll do whatever it takes in any way, like in fitness, in running, in work, like whatever it is, like that's kind of my mentality, is like I'll push harder than anyone else. So workload wise, like I think that just because of the nature of like your channel, it's not necessarily like a normal 9 to 5. Like there's seasons of really intenseness, and then there's seasons of like, okay, we're kind of like not, like we're preparing for the next intense season rather than just like a similar workload all the time. But like I'm not against it. I think that also like the balance of having like the two different channels that you have kind of like lets me work both sides of my brain. Yeah. Like the creative side that wants to like make really beautiful things. And then like, obviously like I ran for a large portion of my life, and like I was and am like an audience member of that channel. So like it's making the content that I wanted to watch. So I think that like it's been great. And also like it is 40 hours a week plus like whatever happens on weekends. But like there's also opportunity to make more money outside of it. Right. And I have with second shooting and just like random commercial jobs, and so it's been good.
And you feel like if we were to rewind to 1 year ago right now, where you basically were in the mindset of prepping to come here, do you feel like you back then would be surprised at the opportunity and the growth that you've had and the money you've made?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've basically like at the end of the year, I will have over tripled my income this year from last year. And I did not expect that at all. Like I expected to come in and get what you said my salary would be. And like, that's it. I didn't really even think about like the potential upside of what else there was to do and make. Coaching and like even just like things that I can make through like your business, like the coaching and the ad revenue and whatever, but then also all of the exterior things as well. Yeah. So,
and to peel back the curtain a little bit on our working relationship with my business, is that from the get-go, the contract we signed was a base salary, but then a third of ad revenue between the two channels, and then a third of coaching as well. And so we haven't really dug into my running coaching business on Rally Caps at all, but we do it through Patreon. We write weekly plans for athletes looking to break their own PRs in the marathon distance, half marathon distance. And so we're working as a team in that regard too. And that sort of started evolving because we started that in July of 24. And we're going to be growing that team. We're bringing on Clark, our friend, as another coach in the group and doubling the amount of athletes it's looking like. And so there's all these opportunities, and we're even talking about business plans. So now it's even evolving into, because in the coaching part, the way I structure payment with you is that's not even on your payroll. That's to Cyrus Hannah LLC. And that's now branching into more collaboration. And so a question I have regarding that is then, so you might have come here and felt like, oh, I'm going to be mentored by Eric. I'm going to learn all this stuff. And I'm sure there's still stuff that's happening, but do you feel much more like a peer now, even just a year in?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like even just like in my knowledge and like, by no means am I saying that I'm like as talented as you, but I feel much more talented than I was when I got here. And so like that makes me feel more like a peer than like, oh, I just suck at both business and the work itself. But like I feel a lot more confident in my ability to do the work, and then obviously like you bringing forth those ideas of like working together on things rather than it being like the employer-employee relationship. Mm-hmm. That obviously makes me feel more like a peer than what I thought it would be moving here. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so fascinating how that can happen so quickly, and I don't think that's going to be the case for everyone. I think that's definitely a special characteristic in you, where you learn at a pretty accelerated pace. But so much of that has to, you go to the running metaphor. It's like the consistency and the reps is assuredly what's giving you so much confidence. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
What reps in particular, like what specific things have made you feel like that?
Oh man. I mean, it's interesting. Like you could look at it a few different ways. Like I'm a lot more confident, even just like in editing on a base level.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I'll just be editing and I'll realize how fast I'm moving and how second nature it is. And that was not the case when I came here.
Right.
Even just like simple shortcuts I didn't know. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of like actual projects, I think that honestly, and I hate to be this guy, but like it is true. I think a lot of it also comes from the access to gear.
Yeah.
Like there are things that I feel like I was capable of making something look good, but I just didn't have lights.
Yeah.
And like lighting is like half of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so like in terms of like making a beautiful like scene, I think that having access to the lights and then also, like testing things out, like Five's Worth of Feelings was a great thing that like tested me creatively. But even that, like now looking back at it, I'm like, oh, we could have done that so much better.
Sure. You were on a certain time frame.
Right.
That's why I'm excited about this upcoming weekend.
Yeah.
The short we're going to make.
Yeah. And then like on the running side, definitely like the Boston race video was, I think, just like the response to it. Mm-hmm. And like, I remember, obviously I was editing it as fast as I could, but I remember coming into the studio like 6 a.m. trying to finish it to post it that morning. And I was finishing the last like 2 minutes of the video. And I was like, as I'm editing it, I'm like crying from like just like how intense and like powerful it was.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, like I've never felt anything like that. And then even just like being able to work with people on things makes it so much easier to make cool things. For example, like the spec that Brax and I just did was something that I would never be able to do by myself. Even just like Braxton knowing Danny, who was the talent, like being able to do things like that. It's like things that I always wanted to do, but just didn't have enough people or like didn't have the gear, all of those things.
I think what's really special about those situations, I've been reflecting on that recently, and it's in part of being in a metropolitan city and being connected to creative people. I think we see a lot of stuff that is produced online and shared online and think that's so unachievable to have that scene, that type of actor, that location, that gear. And the more and more you get reps in and get connected to people, the more and more you realize it's a lot of simple things. And the compilation and compounding of a handful of very simple things. Like the short film we're about to make this weekend, it's the one we're making in collaboration with Canon and the C80. We've been kind of going back and forth on ideas. We had a whole brainstorm session, a solid 2 weeks before we even like put pen to paper and, you know, got a rental and everything. It's really cool that I know at this point that you're capable of being in front of the lens as a lead, which I'm really excited because we really haven't done that at all yet.
Yeah.
But I know that you're capable of doing it based on the short you made where you put yourself in front of the camera.
Yeah.
And it's maybe it was, I didn't really think about this, that's very similar what you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
That you did in your own short.
Yeah.
Maybe that was just like I didn't intentionally do that. You screaming in a car, like that's what's happening. I like clearly, I guess, I can't think of the word, subliminally. I was like, yeah, of course he can handle that.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't be something I would be comfortable asking anyone to do, you know, to be driving down a road and screaming at the top of their lungs, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm excited for that because I know you can handle it, but then you add these other layers of so many things that we know we're capable of, like suction cupping a C80 to the car, because we've already done that with the C70 and gone down the interstate with it with the same setup, and we feel good about that. And renting a vintage car on Turo, because I've rented cars on Turo before. All those components are really cool, but I think what's really special about it as well is that it is still really collaborative, that in it, you know, it doesn't feel like at any point in when I make shorts or do anything creatively that I'm just harboring all of the ideas for myself, but that I want to get your opinion on things because I've seen what you can bring to the table and help. And so it's not just like, here, I shot the stuff, go edit it, but rather, how can we work as a team to make this thing interesting? I don't really know where I was going with that. I just think it's cool. I think it's cool that we have a working relationship now, and especially, you know, going to races and filming races and stuff, that it's not weird that we're just gonna go get an Airbnb for like a day and a half and like, what do we do in the downtime? Like, it's not awkward. Like, we know how to make small talk with each other.
Yeah.
We're actually friends, you know? And so I think that dynamic is really cool too. And it's special because like because in that scenario, if you hired talent, like there's just so much more to work around with that and in production. Yeah. You excited about it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it'll be really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I just keep getting so excited about the image that's coming out of the C80, and you see it firsthand. And it's not often that I act that way.
Right.
Yeah. Because I don't know. It feels like any kind of jealous feeling I would have about an image you make with the FX3. I'm like, it's looking a lot like those, you know, like that full frame look.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting too. On that note, what are you feeling really excited about creatively or work-wise right now? Like, if you were to peer into what's coming in 2025, I'd say both within working for me and then outside of working for me.
Yeah. I think that finally finishing the Kill Crew spec that we did was like a huge weight lifted off my shoulders of like, it was just sitting on that sticky note, like Kill Crew. And I was just never happy with the final product until 2 days ago or last night or whatever. But a lot of stuff like that. I think that when I do this all the time, so I'm going to let the people into my brain for a second. Probably at least once a month, I have like a serious issue of like going down a spiral of what does my next 5 years look like. But when I do that process, it's like, what do I really want to make that can also make money? Or how do I balance those things? And that's like the whole like YouTube or like commercial work, or like how did those work together? Is that like a Danny Gavert style channel? But then I also care a lot about fitness, and does that need to be in the fold, or is that just a personal thing? And then I love money, but is it weird to talk about money online? Like, I appreciated when you did it, but like, are people going to be weird about that? So that's like all the things I think about all the time. But I do want whatever, I don't know what the exact, like the content will be, but I do want to post on YouTube more often next year. I think that that's like removed from work. That's just like a creative fulfillment thing. And in that process, like try and shoot things that look really good. And maybe that is spec, or maybe that's just for YouTube. But I also want to like make things that I can actually get work from. So Brax and I have a plan of like pitching different companies with the spec that we just made. So if that means like making more specs, or even if it's like narrative short film stuff, I don't know. But I do want to do more commercial work. And then like the short films that we do on your main channel. And then, I don't know, I think finding a way to get more creative on the running side with like more cinematic stuff. Not necessarily like dramatic cinematic, but just like occasionally. Like if that means making short films like we make on your main channel, but for the running stuff, I think that would be really interesting as well.
Yeah, I think that's the move going forward. Well, now that all doc stuff is done and it's out in the world, I'm sure you in conjunction feel sort of a weight lifted as well in that regard, even though you didn't have like responsibility to finish that project.
Right.
Does it feel that way at all for you?
I mean, I can definitely tell that you guys are like, oh,
yeah,
thank God that is done.
Right. Like the weight is lifted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just because like, yeah, when you have that long of a project and you have like the final thing done a year ago or however long, and it's like, okay, why are we still not like done with this? But yeah, I think that, I mean, if you want to talk about like that night where you're preparing and exporting.
Yes. Yeah, I want to hear your perspective of this.
No, I mean, it's just like, it's brutal because it's the same. Obviously, it's a lot higher magnitude, but like the struggle that I was feeling with Kill Crew, it's like I loved what I saw in DaVinci, and then I exported it and it looked horrible.
Yeah.
And you guys, obviously, like you're trying to put a feature length film on YouTube. Like there's going to be challenges with that. And then just like timeline with everything else that was going on is like, and then clock's running down and there still isn't like a export that you guys were happy with in YouTube, and then Premiere and the NAS and everything being the way it was, it just like, there were so many complications. And I definitely like watching you struggle with that. Like I was like, thank the Lord that's not me. But still like seeing it, I was like, it's brutal.
Yeah.
So I'm happy for you guys that it's done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess SparkNote's version of that story is we exported it like 6 times that week.
Yeah.
And every time you export it, it takes 4 to 6 hours. And then you have to rewatch the entire film front to end to make sure there's no glitches in it within YouTube as a platform. So I thought we had enough time, with 8 or 9 days, and it literally ended up being the night before. Like we had a version we were okay with posting, but there were things that bothered us within that one. And so very, very happy to have the one that is forever online now. But yeah, that's a really unique perspective because now I'm sure from the outside looking in, when you were watching my stuff and the studio stuff online, to now have a way more intimate reality of what goes on behind the scenes. Did you always imagine that was the case, or does it feel different, like actually experiencing it and seeing it in the studio, like how intense it can be at times?
Yeah, it's definitely different. I I do wonder because I like sometimes I'll just go back and watch your guys' old videos when I have like a night with nothing to do, and even like watching like Steven or Gene's videos from like 2-3 years ago, it does feel a lot lighter in energy in those videos, and maybe that's just the vibe of YouTube 2-3 years ago, or maybe that was the vibe in the studio 2-3 years ago. But yeah, it was a lot of like, oh, let's just like mess around and make something just cause. And like seeing those two specifically and how they've like focused a lot more on their businesses and like kind of stepped away from YouTube a little bit, except for obviously Steven recently made a few videos. But yeah, it's interesting to see, but it also, this is something I talked about on whatever episode I was on with them a couple months ago, but it's good to see people that are much further along in their career going through similar struggles to what I go through on a daily basis. Like seeing Gene or Steven kind of like change the course of their business in the last like year or two.
In real time, yeah.
Yeah, is like, okay, I'm 21, like I'm fine with not knowing what I want in the next 5 years. Because if they just change something at like 28, 29, 30 plus, like, yeah, like you're constantly going to evolve in the creative world, and your business is going to evolve. And even you, like, you were all in on weddings, and then it became more like YouTube and then education. And then now running has become like a large part of your business. So it's definitely like, it's a good thing to see, to remind myself that I'm okay.
Yeah. Well, I think as you build skill sets in, for doing it for a decade or more, I now feel the confidence to be like, oh, if everything fell apart, I could make another YouTube channel on a completely different subject that I'm interested in, and I'm pretty confident that it could be successful because I know the platform well enough now at this point. Or you get enough skills in your tool belt where you're like, like I know I'm hireable in XYZ, and I work really hard as well. Therefore, everything's going to be fine. And so, yeah, I feel like some of the last part of this conversation just kind of revolving around that financial piece, as much as you're comfortable sharing. Like, what does that look like for you? What do you see Chicago as an opportunity for? Like, I know you don't have to share like how long you would want to stay here or those things, but what does this strategic move physically from Florida to Chicago mean for you for your future? And it's okay if you don't know either, because I think a lot of people who are listening, who are young, struggle with this a lot. They might be in a small town. They might be in a place where they don't have access to creative work. Maybe they're relying more on editing online and dealing with cloud-based editing and that kind of stuff, but they want to be boots on the ground. What did it mean to like actually uproot yourself and move to a place for opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, my position at that time may be different than a lot of people, but like I had nothing holding me down other than a girlfriend. But like that conversation went like, hey, like this is like my commitment to you is still the same, but this is like for us and our future. Because how I saw it was like I couldn't really see the next 5 years of at least growth in Florida.
Yeah.
And I knew that coming to Chicago, no matter what happened, it was gonna be better than whatever I was doing in Florida.
With a camera.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in turn financially.
Yeah.
So, but in terms of like, what do I see Chicago being? I mean, it's hard. Like Molly, my girlfriend, has 2 years-ish left of school. So like, that's kind of like a running clock in my head of like, I have 2 years to either like grow a business that like thrives in Chicago or something that thrives on its own and doesn't need to be in a specific location. That kind of determines what would be the situation moving forward.
Yeah.
But either way, like I have very like high financial goals. Like I want to buy properties and like I want to diversify myself and set myself up for success in the future.
Yeah.
I feel the same way of like, I work hard enough that I would be fine if everything crumbled. I would just go get a sales job and
Yeah.
like probably crush. So I don't feel like there's a ton of risk in my situation. Like even dropping out, I thought that staying in school was riskier than dropping out.
Yeah.
And
For someone like you, that makes perfect sense.
yeah, it's proven true because I saved myself from a large amount of debt
Mm-hmm.
and have done the opposite in increasing my net worth substantially.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I'm sure very encouraging for a lot of young listeners, not even young listeners. Like I still consider myself someone who's very young at 33. Like, I'm going through it right now. We're making a short right now for my main channel about what investment looks like versus, money versus personal investment. And like if you end up getting 40, 50 working years, it's a long time to be able to work. It's a long time to be able to pivot. It's a long time to be able to take risks. And it's proven true in your situation and plenty of other people, and, plenty of studies and anecdotes that taking those risks really young is your best option. Like, why not? Why not do it now? Why not have the flexibility? Because I even think of when I was growing my main YouTube channel, most times when I was finishing a video, I've told you this before, I would stay up to like 3, 5 a.m., get 3 hours of sleep, and then go through the next day. And in the phase of life I'm in now with full family and training for marathons regularly, no chance. There's no chance at all. And I'm not interested in that. But I knew that that was the differentiating factor that would grow it exponentially to get to the point, to have the foresight. So this is what I want to close it on. I think the thing that connects you and I a lot is delayed gratification, is understanding it and knowing it well. Not to drop a bomb on you, but what does delayed gratification mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the reality of being only responsible for myself right now, and while that's the case, like grinding as hard as I can because I'm not affecting anyone else by doing that. And I do see the reality because I have people around me like Gene or yourself who have families, and you can't do that. And so it's like, okay, if I have a family in the next 6, 8 years, however long that takes, like that's my timeline to grind as hard as possible. And so like, yeah, I think delayed gratification is like working super hard, and also like, yeah, my income has increased a ton, but like I don't want to spend that much while my income is increasing. This year I've not done a great job because my business has grown so much. So I've been trying to like level up the business, but
next year,
like every other guy, but next year's my year. Yeah. So just like budgeting, being very strict about like actually like maxing out your Roth, saving a substantial amount of money. Yeah, I mean like
saying yes
a
lot.
Yeah, like I don't say no to any job unless like there's a scheduling issue. Like I've said yes to everything since I've been here, and I think that has led to the financial success that I've had, and obviously network that grows from that. And there's even like a few relationships outside of like the studio people that they meet me and they're like, oh, like you would do whatever it takes, and like that sets you apart. And I've had those conversations, and I'm like, I've always felt that way about myself, but like it's nice to hear that other people see that as well.
Yeah. Well, congrats, man. It's incredibly impressive what you have built already at your age. It's kind of insane. And yeah, there's not many people doing what you do. The average net worth is negative at your age. So to even be in the positive is a huge differentiator for you. It's fun to have really candid conversations about finances. That, I think that's a really interesting dynamic that we have, where we're just open books about that with each other. And I think it's super helpful to spur each other on to, be successful in that regard. I think what's going to be most beneficial to us, and, you know, obviously something I'm always going to hammer, is like letting that be the only thing you care about, or the first thing you care about, instead of what I know you care about most is your life and your relationships and your family and Molly. And that's ultimately what you're working towards, you know, and that's a sentiment that I want to make clear. And, you know, the film we're making right now is like the investment of that is far greater. You know, going to the tombstone analogy, like no one's going to care about your net worth on your tombstone. Like whatever, you know, as long as that is a vehicle to allow you to do the things you want to do in life. Not to extend the episode any longer again on a soapbox, but I will. It feels like so often we're just so caught up in the next contract, the next thing, what's gonna double the revenue, what's gonna XYZ. And if you're not careful, like, you will miss the now, you will miss what's happening. I think what wrecked me so hard in one of the Bluey episodes that I watched with my kids, it's I don't know if I told you about this one. It's called Stickbird. And have you watched any of the Bluey at the house? Okay. It's it's an unbelievable show. And even if you don't have kids and you're listening, like, go watch a couple episodes of Bluey. It's actually insane. They'll make you cry in 6 minutes.
Wow.
It's pretty wild. I'll have to show you after we talk about it. But the whole idea is, so it's a family of dogs, and the mom and dad have 2 little girls, and it's a beach day. And you could tell that dad is just sort of off. Like, I immediately resonated with it. It's like, we're having family time, but my brain is just completely somewhere else. And his wife is like, hey, you're missing it. She keeps saying, like, you're missing it. Like, we're at the beach. What are you doing? Like, where are you? Hello. Mm-hmm. And he like snaps out of it. He's like, oh, sorry. So he takes Bluey, one of the girls, off, and they kind of do their own thing. She builds this little bird out of sticks. And there's a group of kids that come by after they get distracted with something else, and they ruin her stick bird, and she's like super upset about it. And so he's trying to console her, brings her over to the ocean, and her sister comes by, and she's super upset. They explain to her what happens, and she's like, you know, when I feel this way, just in her little kid personality, when I feel this way, someone taught me to, like, take all the feelings, like, you grab it like this, and you just throw them as far as you can. And so she does it. Bluey does it. Her sister tells her to. And then she's like, you feel better? She's like, I feel better. And then they both run off, and dad is just sitting there staring at the ocean. And then he does it. And you're just like, oh. Like, completely wrecked.
Yeah.
Like, it just, that whole idea of, like, family and that feeling of, like, being present and knowing that that is the most valuable thing, then it helps you, like, refocus on, okay, I want to let my work stuff be my work stuff, and having those reminders at times where it's like, none of that matters at all. The perspective of, like, your mortality, and just like, who cares? Like, this is what I have right now with them. Embrace it. Be present. Be available now. And so all that to admonish and, like, encourage that you're building towards that while you don't have a family right now, and that, you know, your personal relationship with Molly is long distance, and that being hard. You're clearly building a foundation so that you can be present in those moments later. Yeah. I think what I've found myself to be challenged with, that I would want to encourage you with, is, like, let that foundation be robust enough so that you can have that perspective once you get there, so that it's not a continuation of that.
Yeah.
But rather, we're good. That's solid. Now let's enjoy the now.
Yeah.
Because they'll be gone. And then, you know, that's what I've been going through. Like, I can work after, you know, God willing, I'm still alive after they're out of the house. I can work then too.
Yeah.
But I've built a foundation that's good enough now, so I can be present now. I didn't think I was going to get this deep on this episode. But it's also full circle, because, like, the first conversation we ever had was like this, you know, like, really caring about what's important and letting that be known to one another. And I think, again, that ultimately was like, oh, well, that's very different than whatever kind of transactional thing I've felt with anyone that's wanted to work with me before.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Pretty special, man. It's cool. Yeah, super thankful for you and all the insanely hard work you do, man. It's wild that I can't believe it hasn't even been a year yet.
I know.
It feels like a lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah, and many more things to come. Build and do a bunch more things. So appreciate you coming on and jumping in last minute.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you listening to Rally Caps regularly.
I do.
I don't think I realized that that's how you were introduced to the studio.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Full circle.
Well, as we ask regularly every week, if that was interesting, helpful, entertaining, whatever, if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead, give it a like or a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. Super helpful in helping push this show out to more people, more creative entrepreneurs, artists, everyone in between. And yeah, that's Cyrus Hannah in a nutshell in an hour.
There you go.
All right. Appreciate you, man. Peace, guys.
See you.